Hi, everybody. So what we're going to be doing in this critique is looking at everybody's character projects and focusing on some new things, I guess, in the character designs. Um, the assignment asks you to just keep working, refining your project, and maybe making some corrections, if you have any kind of sort of small kind of cosmetic imperfections in your photographs. We've learned how to correct those, so that's going to be something that you focused on. And what we'll also take a look at is just the design of the character. We'll revisit the backgrounds, maybe revisit the text a little bit, and then we'll kind of talk a little bit too just about sort of polishing the design with an eye towards looking at color, which I think can really be a very great thing to play with at this stage. Now that you have some of the tools to experiment with color, we'll look at how we can kind of create a really good sort of strong palette for your design. And some of you are already heading in that direction anyhow, so it'll just be, refining that a little bit. We'll also talk about maybe adding some movement to the character design, which I think can be really, really fun to do at this point and sort of bring your character to life. What tends to happen is when people are designing their character and putting it together, they kind of put it in a sort of a, just a sort of a basic sort of standing position, but there's all kinds of things you can do with your character, whether it's just moving the, arms and legs around or tilting the head, or you can go further and you can work with puppet warp as well, which can be really great. If you remember back in, I think it was milestone 3, when you tip the head backwards, uh, that using that called the puppet warp technique, that is really a fun thing to work with. Um, And let's see. Oh, adjustment layers are the thing that you were going to be adding, one of the requirements. And I'm pretty sure everybody's got a few layer or adjustment layers in their character, but maybe there's an opportunity to keep building it. And so we'll kind of focus a little bit too on some things we can do with adjustment layers that you didn't know about. We'll see. Hi, Katie. Yeah, so it looks like you have done a lot of work here with adjustment layers. I just pulled this one right here. And oh, isn't that amazing? That's what I love about the tools in Photoshop is that you can do this. Like you didn't have to permanently adjust your photograph. You can just add this adjustment layer. So I love what you've done here. Yeah, to make it more cohesive and flows. It looks like, this entire body area has a similar coloring, which I think looks good in your case. I think it works really well, how it blends all the way through here. And yet what's interesting is that it's clearly different objects that were used to create it. Like they all have different patterns and, structures, which is pretty interesting. Um, and let's see. So, yeah, so you mentioned the flower on the head. Oh, and I agree with you. Yeah, we haven't covered all the tools, like the sharpen tool is something we've not covered. So there is a lot more in Photoshop, but hopefully with this class, uh, everyone will feel more confident about trying other tools out and seeing what they can do. But we really have learned, I think, some of the key ways that Photoshop works, with layers and masking, adjustment layers, layer effects. A lot of those are just really fundamentals that you can build on. Yeah, so with the flower on the head, hmm. Sometimes when I'm not quite sure about something, I take it off and see. So what do I think about taking it off? Is that work better or not? In your case, hmm. Yeah, I don't know. It does seem to work pretty well with the character. Um, so the pink here, and then the next thing I might look at is maybe sometimes I play with size and placement, but I kind of like your size and placement here. I think that works pretty well. Maybe you could try a little bit bigger, maybe a different placement. I don't know. I do kind of like the way, yeah, it seems to, I think, work pretty well there. It kind of adds as sort of like almost like a connection between the cactus and the in the back and the let's move it back to where you had it. And this element here, kind of creates a transition. Sometimes I play with size again. I don't know, the size. Seems to work pretty good. And then the color is sometimes another thing you can play with. And right now your color, it matches your text, which is a nice way of bringing the text and the design together. I always recommend that you pick 2 or 3 colors for a character design, and then you have that color flow through, and you also have the pink picking up in the background too, so it sort of really creates a nice look to it. So I don't know what to say. Maybe you could play with the color a little bit. Maybe pink is not exactly the right color for it. Maybe you could add an adjustment layer. I don't know, maybe it could match the eyes, or so you could play with that and see if maybe it could be lighter. It could match the legs. So you might experiment with that and see if there's something you can do with that that makes you happier with it. Um, Maybe it's not the right flower for some reason, so that could be something. I, I, I think the flower's nice. It sort of picks up on the sort of the qualities of the head, but again, that's something you could look into. Um, you have chosen not to have a shadow, which I think is I think that works in your case because you have such a diffuse background. I mentioned that you could consider it in a previous video, but I think not having it also works. You've got a lot of light and shadow on your character, especially here, so it does have dimension, and it's just floating in kind of in a more. One of the reasons we use a shadow is because it can ground the character with its background, like create a relationship. But with glitter, it doesn't really have that sense of solidity. So a shadow may not even occur there. So it. I think everything else looks really good. You put a lot of work into it. It's really a fun character. It just feels very complete, and you've certainly done a lot of the technical aspects that really have mastered those pretty well. So yeah. Well, I like the new griddle you've added. I think that's a really good choice for your character. Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about some things we could still work on. It looks like you've done a lot of corrections here, which is awesome. That's really what you want to be doing, and making changes to your character. I'm going to just start with the background here. Something I was thinking about with the background is I'm wondering if maybe, I don't know, something you might try is to maybe expand it a little bit to there's still quite a lot of detail. I'm going to just transform it here. Oh, it's so big. Here we go. I see. Okay, so I'm going to hold down the shift key here. I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger here and just kind of see. I'm going to take off those edges as well. So, the edges of the griddle, which you lined up really beautifully, and that might be the solution. But sometimes it's good to maybe experiment and see. I think possibly the image might not quite, it's a little blurry right now. But that's not a bad thing, but I think it's because I stretched it a little bit beyond its pixel size. But I'm just kind of making it a little bit bigger because sometimes I could even see going even a tiny bit bigger, because that way your character will stand out a little bit more, in the sense that the background will have less detail, and it'll sort of allow your character to be a little bit more the center stage and all the details. So something like that, possibly. But if you do something like that, you would need to find a background that's a little bit clearer, like a griddle that's really has a lot more detail, which I think will definitely be out there. But anyhow, okay, so the text. I would keep experimenting with the text a little bit more. Something to think about is like the style of the text. It's a little bit, it sort of falls into that category I think of as a neutral font, which I think is like, it's a good font. It's like very modern, it's clean, but it doesn't have necessarily a lot of character. So you might experiment with that a little bit more. There's a website called Dafont, DAFONT.com, which has just, I believe, just mostly free fonts. And they're kind of like, they're not necessarily the most sort of well-crafted fonts, but they have a lot of different styles of fonts. So if you find in Adobe, like in Photoshop with the fonts that you have, that you don't find anything that's better than what you have, you could experiment with their website. Um, Creative Suite, like Photoshop, does have more fonts than it used to, so you probably could find something in there. Anyhow, I keep experimenting. I do like maybe the way it's like you have it just like no curves or arcs or anything in it. I think that maybe it works for your background with that straight background. I might even consider it. I don't know if I can make it bigger. I don't know if I have. I don't. Yeah, I don't have the font here. That's okay. That's pretty normal that I won't have fonts because there's so many out there. And what that means is if I don't have the font, I can't edit it. But I might make it a bit bigger. It feels like it's still a little light. So maybe, maybe like you could increase it maybe 50% of the size. So I might experiment with that. The other thing I might experiment with too is the color. I love the idea of making it light for, I'm not sure if I can change the color. Let me just see. I just opened the character panel, which is in the Windows area, and I really like to have that open when I work on text, even though a lot of this you can work on the top menu, but I just find it a little bit easier here. And I won't be able to, so it's going to change the font, but what you can actually do here is, and I apologize for changing it, is, let me do that again here, is if you click on the color area in here, it'll open the color picker, and then when you hover over your, and this is just a general tip for everybody, when you hover over your character design, you can see it changes into an eyedropper tool right here. And you can take and use that eyedropper tool, and anywhere on your character you can actually sample it, like click it. Can you see that? It changed the text to that color, and so it's a fantastic way of matching something in your text. Like for example, this red, if you want to go a little redder, can you see that? It like picks up everything. You can make it brown. You can sort of just test it like within about a minute you can go through, and so this doesn't work right, it's too dark. But some of these lighter or brighter colors, that's probably, again, and the reason why it's so great to do this, let me actually just go here. Why it's so great to do this is because, and let's just make it a little bolder here, so it shows up a bit more, is that by doing that, you actually start color matching your character with your design. So in color theory, it's all about, it's really just the same philosophy as like how you might match a room, like if you like, playing with interior design, with your living room colors, or getting dressed in the morning, like how do you make the colors work well? Well, you tend to repeat the same colors and you sort of match them throughout. Like in a room, you might have like a pillow on your sofa that matches part of the carpet, like a little bit of the carpet, or the wall color maybe matches like, some work of art you have, like a painting, so you're kind of threading these colors through a design, and it's the same principle. So that's something you can do here. So that's really the main thing here. I might even play with the background here. So the background, you have a gray color, and it's the only gray you have in your design. Now, why does a griddle need to be gray? Well, no, it's probably actually can be any color, can't it? Like, maybe like another metal color. And so maybe we could change it with an adjustment layer to maybe be sort of more, I don't know, kind of coppery color. That would sort of, I'm going to just pull this up here. And that way you'd also add, you have some adjustment layers here. I don't see them actually doing anything. So you might want to add some more, you want to have at least 2 adjustment layers in your design. So maybe you could work on an adjustment layer for something in your, character pieces. But an easy way to add an adjustment layer, which I think is needed, is in here. So we could, go into, this is probably the easiest one, is the hue and saturation here. So we could kind of play with the hue in the background and sort of maybe see if we can warm it up a little bit. Sometimes you really have to kind of move things around. And then, let's see, maybe I'll take it all the way here. I think it might need a little more saturation. So we play with that. I did the colorize here because it was kind of like not quite giving me much of a change. So you might want to play, there's other adjustment layers that, so I would probably go from here. I might, well, let's just stick with that for the moment, but I might try some of the other adjustment layers for color, like selective color, which does something. sort of similar, or color balance, sort of similar to what we just did, but it makes it a little bit more refined. Because I don't know if this kind of color that I've chosen is exactly what I would be looking for. You know, I'm kind of thinking about maybe I can add a little bit of orange or brown or something that would maybe, you know, work a little bit better for um, the character. You know, if you do want to stick with gray, then you would kind of maybe want to take elements in your character design and make them a little bit grayish. I don't know if that would work for your character just because, let's just clip this here. I'm hitting the Option key, you know, so that it just affects the layer underneath. Uh, um, I'm not sure with food it would work that well with gray. Okay. All right. So, yeah, it looks like your layer masks are there. They could probably be polished a little bit more. These ones down here look pretty good. There's a little bit of a halo here that I'm seeing, and then maybe I think you're right. The neck here looks a little bit. I think Shane mentioned this. Looks a little bit. Um, Oh, oh, I see. So it looks like you cut out. That's what happened here. So you deleted part of of the background. So you want to bring this back in, and um, so you unfortunately once you delete part of the layer, like a photograph, like actually delete it, you can't bring it back in the file, but you can bring this photo back in and then redo the mask. And the more practice you get on masks, the better. And if you don't like, I think you mentioned something about it was too thick, find something else to be the neck. You know, there's lots of other things you can use, probably. Maybe, do you need a neck? Maybe you don't even need a neck. Let's just see here and pull this down. Would that work? You tell me. This is, you know, it's up to you. But you can sort of, maybe the neck is um, not not needed. You know, you can always sort of decide yourself. Or again, you could maybe find something else that becomes the um, the neck. It looks like these chocolate chips don't have a background on them. Oh, here it is. Is this it? Some of them don't. Okay, so it's there. Okay. Yeah. So that's the main thing here. It actually, I think, could work without the neck. I would add and play around with now at this point I would play around with your movement. It's your character's looking a bit stiff. What could the character do? A way to figure out movement is to figure out what do you want your character to do. Do you want your character to be jumping up and down or waving, walking, running, maybe just like hand on the hip. You know, you can kind of think about that. Um, and I could also see adding a little puppet warp here, like maybe add a little curve to the body, perhaps. I think that'd be really cute. Sometimes what people do is they kind of like create like a sense that the character might be like inhaling. So maybe, you know, it's like body is like sort of a little bit kind of curved, you know, out here. Because it's breathing out, or maybe it's breathing in a little bit, and so you get a little bit of a concave curve. You could do it very subtly. So play around with that. You know, maybe one of the legs is kicking out, or you know, just kind of have fun with that. Okay, so I think you're on the right track here. We've got one more critique to go. So you've got still quite a bit of time here to kind of experiment and you know, put the finishing touches on your character. And yes, I liked all the things you mentioned that you were doing with your character, just small things. Yeah, I agree with you. I think the mouth looks better now, just in terms of like matching the other parts of the design, like you're matching it here to here. Again, that's awesome. That's exactly what you want to be doing. And also brightening the eyes. That was a really good move. And all the other, yeah, all the other things you've mentioned. That's a really, you know, good way to be thinking about your characters. How can you, you know, bring elements together to make it look like your character just is like a cohesive whole. Um, you know, so yeah, you know, I don't know if I really have anything else to add. Uh, you know, you've got some space here, so I might suggest giving yourself a little bit of a margin here with your text. That's just one of those graphic design principles where we uh, give a little bit of a space. You know, I could see you pulling it in. Let's see if I can do that here. I know you've got a clipping mess. And you know, sort of you can sort of play with it, but you know, you can give it a little bit more space right here, like line it up and then pull it down just a little bit. I think that's what I would do with that, you know, again, thinking about the space that you have. But other than that, yeah, I think this looks really good. I think it's very balanced. You've got a good foreground and background relationship and a lot of nice movement. Color looks very harmonious. So yeah, good. Okay, Jennifer, well, I'm glad you were able to rebuild your file. It looks like you've got your layer mask in, which is fantastic. That's exactly what you wanted to have done. And, you know, as I mentioned earlier, this is really the most important, one of the most important things we are learning in class is layer masks. So, in terms of building our character, so that's great. You got it. That's wonderful. So, okay, so you mentioned about the box. I'm assuming you mean this box right here. Right here, is this what you're talking about? Yeah, we talked about this back in the critique if you want to check out for Milestone 3 Task 2 for the character project, because a lot of students were having this problem. Essentially what it is caused by is, for whatever reason, Photoshop, let's see if we can find this layer. Let me just investigate. So it's right up here in this layer. If I turn it off, can you see how it disappears? It's actually, if you look at the layer mask, you can see it's in, that little edge is in the position of the edge of the photo, like right here, this little edge. And it's just really caused by, I don't know, Photoshop just does it sometimes. I don't know why. What it does is when you create a layer mask, it creates this, it leaves some of the pixels behind for the edge. You know, that's the background basically. And so you can just fix it by just, you know, doing what we do with working with the layer mask is we just click directly on that layer mask. And again, you know, I'll do this super quickly. So definitely review the video I mentioned, the critique, and you can just kind of clean it up here by using black to mask it. That's it. That's all it is. Okay, so yeah, overall, I loved your character design from day one. I think it looks really good. I think your layer masking is looking pretty good. I would maybe kind of, this is another thing where just Photoshop sometimes does this, where it leaves something behind, and it's kind of creating this like weird halo around the feet, which doesn't look super great. It's not bad, but it could probably, uh, I probably think that this is something you could also clean up using the technique we just did of clicking directly on this layer mask and then you know, further masking it manually. Again, you know, we did a lot of this. Take a look at the video for Milestone 3. We did a lot of this in that video, but you could kind of come in here and just kind of get rid of these. A trick I used, I didn't use this in the video, but what I do is I'll take the brush and I'll actually lower the opacity quite a lot so that what I can do is make several, so instead of the brush being super strong in terms of wiping out that mask or adding the mask, it'll do it very gently. And so what I can actually do is several passes here. And in a way, it's like a way of feathering. Like I can kind of feather that edge a little bit because it's like only picking up a little bit. So I can sort of remove, so you can see here, I can kind of clean up that edge very gently, in a very gentle way. And you can just go through here, you know, watch a little TV as you do this or whatever. And then go through, I might make the opacity, it's not quite picking up quite enough, but if you do enough, and then what you do is you zoom back and you see, and you look at it and you go, oh, maybe I need a little more. So you can kind of zoom in and zoom out on your mask. So that's what I would do there. Okay, background. I love your background, except it feels a little too dark in the sense that it doesn't feel like your character is quite standing out enough and maybe the shadow's getting a little lost. So what I do here for this kind of thing is I kind of think about what can I do with the back. And the reason why I love your background is because it's very simple and textured, but it's a little bit of texture, but it's very simple, so your character it's got a nice blank slate quality. But so I might go in here, and again, you know, all these adjustment layers do different things, and some of them are similar, and I might, for yours, maybe I would try lightening it a little bit. Sometimes when we think dark is going to make everything stand out, sometimes it does, but sometimes it doesn't. So maybe sometimes the exposure adjustment layer can be really good here because what it does is it makes it like it pretends that it's a camera and it's changing the exposure. So we could try lightening it a little bit. So now can you see we're seeing the beautiful shadow come out, and the character, actually the colors look a lot nicer. So I'm just going to put it there for now and see. And I think that looks, yeah, I don't know, I don't know what you think, but I think it looks really good. And you notice I didn't clip this adjustment layer. I didn't actually because it's the bottom layer. But if you add an adjustment layer anywhere else above, you always want to, you can hold down the Option or Alt key on your keyboard. This is the fast way, and sort of hover it above this line and click it, and it'll clip the layer. So so it looks like you want at least one other adjustment layer in here for your character. So think about where you might want to put an adjustment layer. Like maybe the eyes, I don't know, they're pretty cute with blue, but there's no other blue in your character. Do you know what I mean? Like, so it feels like that's the only thing that's in there that's blue, so maybe they could go pink, or something else that would match your character design. So these guys might be a way to work on an adjustment layer with them. The text, I love the text in terms of the style, the curve. It feels a little cramped over here and a little small. I'm wondering if you could, like you've got the cherry stem here, which is, I love the placement of it, but I'm wondering maybe you could arrange the text in some way so it like gets a little, so it can be a little bit, maybe bigger, but maybe somehow you could float it across so that there would be some space, like somehow you could work on it. I'm not saying this is exactly right because I think you maybe want it a little bigger, but maybe it could somehow float across and show that cherry stem somehow, but you could experiment with just, again, maybe making it a little bigger, again, playing with that spacing, something like that. That's not quite right. It doesn't, again, it's hiding the cherry stem. But you get the idea of just somehow making it maybe a little bit more bold in your design. Okay, all right. Glad you got those layer masks in. You've done a lot of really good work here. I really like the new background. I think that's wonderful. It's like kind of very sort of rustic and ranch-like. It really suits your character. It's picking up on the browns as well in the boots and the hat and the mustache. And I really do like all the changes. It looks like he's got his shoulders up, with his ready to, work, or, he's got that kind of stance. It works really well with your character. The boots are great. It looks like you've done that, a lot of puppet warping as well to just get the legs looking the way they are in the arms, which is fabulous. So I only have just a few small suggestions here, because I think it's looking really good. I would probably suggest using this arm for the bacon instead of the bacon. As much as I like the bacon, I kind of feel like it sort of maybe suits your character a little bit more to have two arms that are the same. In general, that's the case for most characters. That symmetry seems to work the best. So maybe either bacon or spaghetti. I don't know, what do you think? What would you, if you chose, would it be both of them a spaghetti or both of them bacon? It's hard to say. I'm kind of leaning towards the noodles. So, you can just take this real quick. Let's see did I get it already? No. Hold on just a sec. There we go. So I think we got that. So you can just take it, and then in the transform area, you probably are aware of this already. Hold on a second again. Sorry, I should have gone to the edit area. You can actually then flip horizontal, which is great. You can kind of flip it, and then it automatically flips to the same orientation. So I don't know, maybe. So that would be something to think about. I'm not sure about the watermelon mouth. It's not quite reading as watermelon. It's reading just sort of as a bit of orange or red. So maybe, do you need that? Maybe you don't. I don't know, that kind of, maybe I don't know if you need it or not. It seems to work pretty well without it. The text. The text is a wee bit hard to read, and I wonder if it's because a couple of things. The arc of it is a little bit large in the sense like it's curving quite a lot. So maybe sort of make the arc a little bit more gentle. Maybe it could sort of be above his head, but in an arc rather than coming down to his hands. So that could be a way that will make it more legible or easier to read. And it looks like this is a not editable text, so I can't edit it. But then you could play with maybe the color. Maybe it could be a bit lighter. Like I might consider like maybe picking up on one of the colors in the character already, like maybe the light green or light brown or light yellow. You know, that could be more legible using that technique we did of just picking up one of the colors in there. And it looks like what you were doing is matching it with the watermelon, and because, well, let's put that back in so you can see. Yeah, so you can see it ties in there. But maybe it looks like the watermelon is even a little bit brighter, so you could maybe make it a bit brighter red if you end up keeping the watermelon. Yeah, that's all I have to suggest. You know, I think everything else looks really good in your character, and yeah, look forward to your next version of it. Brianna, all right. I love the floor that you have for your character. I think that's very nice. I probably think that maybe this up here is a little bit too busy, having so much of the kitchen. You know, again, this particular design as kind of assignment, you know, the idea of building a character is a little bit different from a lot of other types of designs in the sense that having these objects, trying to put them together, having a busy background or even a, you know, a moderate amount of detail that might work in another design just doesn't work so well in this character design. So I might just like put like a wall behind there. She could be standing in front of just a simple wall. It doesn't even have to have any detail, you know, and that would work really well with the flooring, I think. So you might give that a try. Definitely make your character bigger. I would say she should come down all the way down to here, you know, and then up higher. Like I would take your text and um, move your text up, you know, a little higher. You know, you can take it pretty close to the top, but give it a little margin, make it a little bigger, so it's a little easier to read. But I think once you have a nice simple background, it'll be a lot easier to read. But bring your character right up, you know, make it really fill the frame. That's going to be so nice to see. You want to see all the work you created in the character itself. Um, so I'm going to zoom in here so we can really take a look at your character. Yeah, so your character I think overall looks good. I love the lettuce leaf, the arms, the head looks really nice. I'm not 100% sure about the body, and the reason why is it doesn't feel like I can actually see the objects. Like you want to be able to, like what's beautiful about the lettuce is that I can look at it, I can see, oh, it's a lettuce leaf. Oh, but it's also a skirt. Isn't that cool? Same with the arms. I can go, oh, they're made out of sausages. Isn't that great? Whereas here, these two elements, I don't know what they've been made out of. And so it kind of deflates the sense of how creative they were, you know, how the creative part of them in the design. So think about how could you, you know, you want this really feminine sort of wasp waist like character, you know, so what could you add in here that might give you that sense, like maybe one single object. Like I was thinking, what about a pear turned upside down? You know, pears, you know, have this sort of rounded bottom. Let's look at a pear. A pear could potentially, you could flip it upside down and it could maybe read as what you want, or you know, something else. This is where you can be really super creative and try to figure out maybe you want two objects there or more. So yeah, that's what I'd work on here. And in terms of the color, it looks like you have what I'm going to look at the text and the character. You have like oranges. You've got oranges and greens in here. So you know, whatever you pick in here, somehow maybe that could fit in with the orange and green theme. You've got a little bit of blue in here, which is the only blue here, so maybe you could work on having, like the outline here could be maybe a blue color. Let's see, I'll show you what I mean. You could take the stroke layer here, and we could take, let's see how we can fit this in. Right here, the color, it does exactly the same thing as what we did before. You could maybe match it to the eyes, maybe? So now, like, the eyes match. Like, can you see now the eyes start belonging in because we've matched it with something else. So you can give that a try, something like that. Or you can change the color of the blue and make them green like the lettuce. So you could just have all red and green. Yeah, so keep experimenting here. Hi Jess. Yes, so it looks like you've been working with oh, I love the idea of changing these. That's a great idea. So you've been really experimenting with how to do that. It's really a very powerful tool. And yeah, I like what you're doing with that. So let's just we're going to start with the background. So I think this is a fairly simple background. It feels like maybe I might experiment a little bit more with that background. It feels like maybe there's quite a lot of detail with it. I wonder if there's something we can do. Let's see here. To maybe make it less busy. Like, can we expand it a little bit so that maybe the bricks are a little bit bigger? So again, you want everybody to look at the detail of your character. So you could even go a little further. You know, you could keep I would keep experimenting with that a little bit more. I feel like with your character that you could really have a shadow, you know, like the cast shadow that we looked at, I think it was last week. Because that would give you a sense of the distance it has from the background. So I think that would work really well. So color, yeah, I would play a little bit more with your color. So the thing to do is to decide what colors do I want to have in my character. And the way to start with that is to sort of maybe look at an element in your design where you do like the color. Like, it looks like you're really into the purple here, since you changed the rose purple. So maybe that could be your base color. Like, everything is in the purple range. Like, so now what you do is you use adjustment layers to change things to purple, and maybe you'll have an accent color. Like, I mean, it's up to you what you want to decide. Maybe this baby blue, you know, and so everything is going to follow that. And so your text is going to be that color, you know, so you play with that. So that's what I would work on. Then I'd work on adding a little more movement to your character. You know, you can do that either just by moving objects in, you know, singularly, like just kind of taking the transform tool and, you know, moving them around a little bit. You know, so maybe your character could be like doing some running or jumping or whatever you decide, or the puppet warp you could add, you know, just to kind of give your character a little more uh, playfulness. Yeah, so those are some of the main things: color, cast shadow, background a little bit more, text. You know, it's a little hard to read here, so you might try blurring this out in the back of the bottom so that it's a little easier to read. I have some tutorials for how to do that in my initial post, you know, how to selectively blur things. I don't know about the caterpillar, you know, I wonder about the caterpillar and the heart. Do you need those? I kind of feel like maybe they don't feel like they quite are like connecting to the design yet. I might see maybe you don't need them. It kind of looks cute without that. Maybe put more attention into the arms, like they feel like they're getting a little lost now. Maybe they could be a bit bigger or have a brighter color to them. So keep experimenting. I think you're almost there. Um, and yeah, so keep working with what we've talked about. Hi Ricardo. Okay, so I really like your new background. I think that's much better. You know, I love the kind of the desert. I think that's really beautiful. And the kind of the idea of the empty sky. So I think that's working well. So a couple of things here I'd work on with your design is, first of all, the text. Just remember, it's Terrible Toys Todd or Tanya. So that's really important to change. And also maybe experiment with the color here. It feels like this gray color, well, you know, it's matching here. It feels like I think maybe because there's so much bright color everywhere else, it feels like it's getting a little lost. I understand why you chose it, but I wonder if maybe you do need to make it like fit. Like right now you've got, let's say, orange, green, and gray are your colors, and with a little bit of blue in the background. So maybe you need to change it into a brighter color just so that it stands out. Something to think about. I would definitely think about a cast shadow for your character since he's standing on the desert, so it seems like a cast shadow would work in your case to fall on the sand. And I'd work on maybe playing around with the movement of your character. He still looks like he's standing a bit stiffly, so think about what he could do. Maybe do some adjustment to maybe moving him around, even a little bit, like having the head tilted or the arms moving a little bit. That'll really help. Now, the eyebrows, I think we talked about before. I like the idea of an eyebrow, but because it's not part of it's an object, it's not something that we always want to be using photographs for our character. So maybe you don't need the eyebrows. Maybe it would work without that. Okay, so finally, I wonder, I might play with, maybe the background, let's see, I'm going to just turn off this layer and go to the cloud layer. I might experiment with maybe like a background with the clouds that's maybe a little more desaturated. This might be something you could play with a layer mask. Like maybe, let's see what it does here if we desaturate it a little bit. Or maybe make it lighter, kind of play with that. It feels like it's a little too intense for the character, like the character's losing, maybe I don't know if lightening it works, but maybe making it, I don't know if those work here. Maybe desaturating it is the way to go. But, maybe sort of playing with that, or maybe finding a background cloud that doesn't have clouds. Maybe it's just more of an empty space. To kind of, again, to sort of make the background not so strong in terms of an element so that your character stands out. That's really so important. Maybe you could also make your character a little bit bigger, like you could maybe take your text and have it in a single line so that your character could come up a little higher and be bigger. That would also give you more, again, your character feels like it's still maybe getting a little bit lost. Not too bad, but I think you could make it bolder with some of those suggestions. Okay, so that's what I might keep working on. Hi, Melanie. Yeah, I love the idea of adding an adjustment layer to the bow on the head, and I do think that's a nice element that you have, you replaced, what you did is you found a new image here for, let's see, where is that bow? Oh, maybe you meant for the head. Yeah. But I think that new element works a lot better. You have this cable that is just a much stronger element in terms of the photograph. Yeah, overall, so you've got kind of like a blend of, looks like violets and sort of pinks and greens and then some silver, which I think is great. So that's your palette. So I would say, so I'm still not really, I still think this background is too busy for your character. I always want to come here and turn this off so I can see your character, And when that happens, when you know that maybe you do need to reconsider that. So I would go to Google Images, type in stages, concert stages, just look for something really simple. There are a lot out there, and replace that. Looks like you've got two shadows here. Depending upon what you end up choosing, I think this one, the lower one here, I think works better just because it is a little further away from your character and you have a lot of detail in your character. So, let's turn this off and see. Well, yeah, maybe. It's hard to say, but I think this one like the lower shadow might be a little bit better for your character. Okay. I think your text is still a little busy too. I would choose one of these text treatments, like either this or this. I like either maybe this one or this one, and maybe make them all, like connect them a little bit more. I don't know, we'll see. Depending upon your background, I think I would focus on your background at this point because it's possible that your background might make a real difference and make it possible for you to have, a really busy, text treatment, like with a lot of things going on. So you might want to experiment with that. So those are the main things here. I might make your legs the same possible color, like your symbols here. Choose one of these colors. I think having them different, maybe making them, it may not make them appear like the same feet. And I think that would probably be a good thing. I think it would look cute, either of these colors. So those are some of the things I keep working on. Yeah, keep experimenting on those areas. Okay, Conrad. Okay, looks like you've done a lot of cleanup here too, which is great. And I think you mentioned that you had added an adjustment layer here in the background, which is, yeah. So I think that your character is coming along. I've really always liked the design of your character. You know, it just really works well for Terrible Toys Todd and has some really nice elements to it, especially this element right here, your body. So here's a few things I'm thinking of. One is that I still think your character is a little small on your page. I'd really expand your character a lot. Like I would take your text here and I would lower it, maybe even make it a bit bigger. I think your text is a bit small too. Maybe a little bit bigger. You could even stretch it, make it taller, just sort of really bring it out, you know, pull it out of the design a little bit more so it's really standing out. Make your character really, you know, come down a little bit more, make it really fill the page. Those are some of the main things you could do with your design. I might play with your background a little bit more too. It is a lot of detail in your background, which makes it a little hard to really see your character. So what are some things you could do? One of my favorite things is always to take a background and see if we can, by zooming in a little bit more, can we make it less detailed? You know, by zooming in, you often kind of can, you know, I know you want some lightning in there, and I don't have a lightning part, but I just want to see what'll happen if we do that. So already that's a little bit, you know, can you see how, let's just compare it here. So you can see how much detail is in the sky and how if we just do that one thing, we end up with kind of like a cloudy sky. And again, maybe you could find a place that has a little more lightning. But it just makes it a lot easier to see your character. So things like that, I would play with that with your design a little bit. The other thing I would play with is even maybe taking and desaturating your background a little bit. You've got red, orange, silver, and the black in your design. So maybe those could be colors that you would pick up in your design by working with some adjustment layers there, like, you know, maybe taking the green out or, you know, just really making the color not so strong so that your character color is what stands out. Okay, so that's what I keep working on here.